Hello, everyone. Thank you for the encouraging applause at the beginning. This is our first conference talk, and this is actually Emma's first time at a conference, so be nice. We're here to tell you about the kind of rather wild past year or so we've had. It's kind of a story. There are a few smatterings of kind of learnings and takeaways in there, but we're kind of seeing this a bit like a cathartic sharing session. Hopefully it's interesting, and hopefully there's elements in there that you can relate to your own experiences, past or present. We might take questions at the end. We're kind of going to see how it plays out. Depends a bit on how much time we've got left and how we're feeling at the end. This is the beautiful slide the brand team put together for us. It's the who we are when it comes to Bloom & Wild. You might spot the exact same slide in Mr. Steve Janaway's presentation tomorrow if you're attending that. But ultimately, we are Europe's leading online flower delivery company. We trade across 8 different markets, and we acquired a couple of European peers last year. And tech and data are at the heart of everything we do. So this is the kind of setting the scene slide. So we're going back to April 2021. I'd just come back from mat leave. We'd had a period of aligning our squads around different phases of the customer journey. Myself and Emma were about to head off to the range and supply squad. We knew what our domain was. We had the makings of a roadmap. We had our squad in place. We were kind of ready to get cracking. We'd begun the process of componentization. So splitting out the large old Ruby monolith into manageable components that could be owned by the squads.
However, the eagle-eyed among you on a previous slide we mentioned that we'd just acquired 2 businesses in 2021. So technical integration was on the horizon and everything was about to change. Cue the integration. Our friends at Bloom had their gifting offering on Shopify, and the subscription platform had which was PHP, which was on a separate platform too. But we'll speak more about that a little later on. So we'll start off with the mission. We wanted to create a scalable and customer-first platform that would unlock revenue and growth for both Bloom and Bloom & Wild. So, why integrate? We wanted to demonstrate the Bloom & Wild capabilities to have a digital platform that was multi-brand and that we could support other platforms, other brands in the future, which would enable us to support growth. We wanted to utilize our digital engine capabilities in order to grow Bloom gifting business. We decided to tackle gifting first. As Bloom & Wild, we spent years optimizing our digital engine, and the hypothesis was that we could grow the Bloom gifting business by leveraging our bespoke platform and its features, from acquisition technology to the My Account editing order functionality. We're yet to agree whether it was a square peg, round hole, or round hole, kind of squeezing it in situation. But we'll get to some of the reality in a bit. We're going to integrate the Bloom e-commerce system with the Bloom supply chain as well. So we wanted to spread our operational options as well. But there were some early challenges. The company was growing rapidly. My stakeholder base had doubled. There was a complicated web of humans, some of whom I'd never met before, with different tools, processes, and communication styles. Some teams hadn't interacted with product before, and I was meeting people for the first time and then asking them to explain their processes and justifying those. It was a little bit like treading on eggshells. We had a roadmap already at Bloom & Wild. We'd set up a strategy, and this was what we're going to work on. So from that aspect, we had to kind of take stakeholders on the change curve with us. OKRs and reiterating the business strategy at any opportunity was really helpful to bring everyone together, from the stakeholders to also the engineers in the squad. There'd been projects that they were excited to work on, and there were things already that they had their eyes on that we'd then be delaying. This helped give clarity, and at any opportunity I was telling everybody why we were doing this and what the business impact was for doing it. So what were we doing?
So the way we approached the discovery period for the gifting integration was to divide up the kind of what we need to do into 38 outcomes into the owning squads. So this was like fairly easy. Now we had these really clear-cut domain boundaries and definitions of what each squad was responsible for. We had 2 weeks to go away and discover how we thought it would be best to kind of approach the problem and our kind of preferred approach before sharing that back to the group. So this is a list of the outcomes that we had in range and supply. We kind of, went off, started scurrying around, figuring out how we're going to do all of this, and ultimately kind of found out that predominantly a lot of it was done. We just need to think about how we're going to support it across brands in terms of surfacing products to the clients, and then also within the admin interface. So we're like, okay, so what are we going to do now? Ultimately, we took ownership for elements of the integration that sat outside of any squad. So these were things like importing customer data. So this was across both the Shopify platform and then also the Bloom on Subs platform. Marketing preferences, once we've got all of the users in there, we need to obviously make sure that we're not inadvertently emailing them if they've decided to opt out. And then we built a proxy so that the Bloom on customers would have a seamless experience between the Bloom on Subs platform and the Bloom on Wild gifting platform.
Enter the proxy party. I can't take credit, that was one of the engineers in our squad. So the problem that we had was Bloom on historically had subscription accounts. So they had my accounts for subscription customers, but historically not for gifting. So they'd chosen not to have a gifting login, but we knew that it's a really important retention tool to be able to manage your orders, save addresses, save occasions. So we wanted to make the most of the Bloom on Wild platform from a gifting perspective, so we knew that we would need to introduce the concept of an account. But having 2 accounts for the same brand is just weird experience. And my mind boggles at thinking about doing the subs integration at the same time as gifting. So at the time, what was kind of perceived a little bit as like throwaway work or something that we wouldn't keep forever actually de-risked the integration. So I think one of the key learnings for us that was de-risking delivery was not wasted work, and it enabled us to separate out the two elements. This tech's still in use now, so I think we were naive in thinking that it would only be for a couple of months, but it's been used for a lot longer than that. It's allowed us to unlock benefits while de-risking, and we've used this approach in decoupling parts of the wider integration as well. It's been a mindset shift for us, thinking about how we decouple bits of work that we're delivering. So the rollout. In November, we took a phased country-by-country approach, starting with countries with lower delivery volumes. It went seamlessly, and the migration for gifting was done. But it wasn't time to rest on our laurels. Stakeholders had been waiting patiently around the business while we worked through the gifting integration. And once the final country site went live, we thought it was time to celebrate, but the floodgates opened from a stakeholder perspective. And also the subscription integration was just around the corner, so we need to start thinking about that. So what did we take away from the gifting integration? Alignment from the business-wide OKRs through the EM-PM pair were crucial for getting the squad on board through a time of intense change. Staying focused on the balance between gathering enough context but not getting too hung up that we would have every requirement and edge case covered in advance. That just wasn't possible because there were so many unknowns. So trying to kind of make progress and navigate those changes as they came. Embracing diversity. It was super important for us to make sure that people's voices were heard and their approach. We could incorporate people's opinions within the squad into how we approach the problems. We made sure that we had extra time in stand-up for chit-chat, even at a time where we didn't feel there was much time. We tried to squeeze in social events. It was a time when quite a lot of people were working remotely still, and I think some of the team hadn't even met at this point.
So roll on 2022. It was a new year and time for new squads and a new focused energy on our tech strategy. So in Jan 2022, the Bloomont tech team integrated with the existing Bloom & Wild structure, incorporating the supply chain operations and procurement and production. I also went off to head up the newly formed subs engine squad, which was the first cross-hybrid squad responsible for both maintaining the existing legacy Bloom subscriptions offering and key elements, building out key elements of the integration build. So this meant that, sadly, we were no longer working together.
We thought we would be when we applied to be here, so it was a sad moment for the pair of us.
So this was the tech strategy. There wasn't a huge change from 2021, but we wanted to keep building on what we'd started the year before. So this was how we were planning to achieve the tech strategy. The middle element, the red block there, is the kind of most important of what we're talking about here. So separating applications into technical domains and squads owning the systems is what we've been focused on. Ultimately, the way we've kind of been approaching problem solving has been fundamentally changing. We've been moving into the next phase of componentization. So after splitting the monolith into kind of legacy folders, we then want to start building out properly separated components using public-private interfaces and taking a truly kind of domain-driven approach to all development thinking. It's very, very different to where we were a year or so ago when we were predominantly kind of one back-end squad all working across the entire code base.
Alongside the tech strategy, we also wanted to start teeing up the Bloom subscription migration. We had a new mission. So we wanted to create the customer-first subscription experience that was scalable and unlocked revenue and growth across all Bloom & Wild brands while minimizing churn. What was the vision? Well, it was a lot. Please don't read all of it. There was a lot going on. There were many angles we were trying to nail whilst applying the tech strategy to ensure we didn't pile up tons of tech debt in the process and making sure that we were making the business impactful changes. So we were kind of taking a more considered, longer-term approach than we did with gifting. So why integrate again? We wanted to deprecate the legacy PHP subscription offering and consolidate our platform. Since acquisition, the two different businesses had solved problems in slightly different ways. Emphasis on slightly because the slightly became quite complex when we tried to start the integration. We wanted to expand our multi-brand capabilities to cover different functionality too. And we also wanted to optimize the order management. Bloom is a gifting a subscription expert, so they had functionality and features and learnings that we wanted to roll out to the Bloom & Wild brand also. Assumptions. So from the, obviously the squads that were involved was growing, and the interdependencies that we were seeing were growing as well. We knew that the approach that we'd taken for gifting, where we had all squads working on discovery at the same time, just wouldn't work this time. So we started making assumptions across squads. This enabled squads to kind of separate out discovery. We had things like charging will remain the same. So there's some of the, like the approach was the same, but also things like features. So we wouldn't allow customers to choose the bouquet for a subscription. So having these shared approaches across squads enabled different squads to start working on discovery. And we've not got it right every time. And some of the assumptions have been proved wrong or we've changed, but it's helped us identify mismatches across squads. I think today there's a session to go through them that we're missing. But to make sure that we're constantly checking in across squads as like a shared language of what we're building to, so we don't deviate too much.
So this was discovery for the subs integration. Again, we took a different approach, focusing instead on the platform and where we needed to evolve it to, instead of the user journey focused outcomes that we had for the gifting integration. We identified areas that would require the biggest investment and that also had the highest levels of ambiguity. We found that these were predominantly within the fulfillment and operations space, which is where we first focused our attention. So out of discovery, we created a set of milestones for a phased approach to delivery. This enabled us to break down the problem and tackle each one incrementally. This is a breakdown of M1 and the phases that are involved here. Ultimately, we wanted to introduce the new stock concept, start syncing Bloom orders into the Bloom Wild platforms in the shape of scheduled deliveries, beginning using this to then generate our data science-led forecasting model and complete M1 by enabling Bloom on subs fulfillment, but on the Bloom Wild platform, which would then enable us to kind of chop off that element of the current legacy platform. So again, more difference. There's ultimately bigger changes required for subscriptions in order to reach feature parity. There was a higher risk because of the customers that were involved, so the higher risk of churn due to them being subscription customers, and large technical changes that were required. And we'll talk a bit more in detail about each of these bullet points next. And all the while we're doing this, we're making sure that we're applying this new way of thinking in regards to the tech strategy. So the first big bit is scheduled deliveries. So this is what my squad's predominantly been working on for the past few months. One of the kind of key outcomes that we needed in terms of migrating the Bloom on customers over was this ability to have a flexible delivery schedule. So on the Bloom Wild platform, historically, you were only able to manage your next upcoming delivery, whereas for Bloom On, you were able to manage up to your next 3 months. So the approach we took here was to introduce this new concept of scheduled delivery. There are lots of pros to this, whilst it's new, and therefore hard work. It decouples the ops tech and e-com sides of generating deliveries. It enables us to start thinking about deliveries as like immutable manufacturing orders, whereas before they'd been involved from right at the beginning of the customer journey from point of order creation, which ultimately assists with us furthering our tech strategy. An alternative approach could have been to start creating multiple deliveries up front, which would have maybe been easier, but it would have meant that we were creating unnecessary objects in the database, which might have ended up being cancelled and wouldn't have allowed us to start pulling apart e-com and ops tech. The next big thing is the compatibility layer. So how are we going to surface these new scheduled deliveries out to the clients? We kind of have had the concept of a compatibility layer in the pipeline for a while, and this is just the first use case where it's come up. So the kind of pros here is that there's no rework required. So the kind of image you can see here is where one of our client-focused squads has been working on the calendar view for delivery management. They've done that based on the existing APIs. So if we start surfacing them via compatibility layer, then there's no rework required here. It also means that there's backwards compatibility for old versions of the app. This is quite a big one. So historically, we've taken quite a tentative approach to old app version deprecation. I think it's a well-known problem. It's very easy to quantify the revenue generated by users that are on old versions of the app, but maybe slightly harder to quantify the amount of work and effort it takes to maintain them. So in putting this compatibility layer, it frees us up to start moving about kind of under the hood without worrying about that. It also enables us to build out scheduled deliveries in a kind of calm and considered manner without having to coordinate releases against front-end, back-end, and apps. And unlocks future back-end improvements by enabling decoupling of the API and database, which has long been baked into our application because of use of tools like ActiveAdmin and JSON API.
Next up was stock. So there were some areas that we were touching as part of the subscription integration that had been I'd say neglected. And one of those things that really was creaking at the seams was our stock keeping approach. It was worker run, and every peak, flowers is a very peaky business. We were running the oversell gauntlet, and we were manually managing oversells, because obviously that has a huge customer impact and is something that we definitely didn't want to be having. So the approach to the roadmap creation for subscriptions was different to gifting, where with gifting we were focused purely on getting it done. With subscriptions we were thinking about how many other things we could tackle along the way as well. So it's kind of like interweaving a roadmap with business benefits for historic problems that we'd had, but also thinking about subscriptions. So there were 3 reasons why we wanted to tackle stock at this particular time. the ability to allocate stock, to plan subscription deliveries and existing book deliveries would then enable us to build data science-led forecasting models. We wanted to remove the risk of oversells. Obviously, the more products we had, the bigger the company got, the higher that risk would become. And also stock keeping for non-perishables. As a weird twist, we've got very good at handling perishables, which are probably like objectively harder, but because we've done it for longer, our systems are built with that in mind. So then when we started selling vases and plants where we want to be able to keep stock for a longer period of time, we didn't have that flexibility within the old system. We didn't think at the time that that was designed that we would have such a broad range. So now we've got a system that's fit for scale. Another thing that we tackled was floating deliveries. This is like, I wish they looked like that. I was trying to find a good diagram. I was like, I think I'm going to go with the GIF. But our system, the monolith, is a web of concepts that are all interconnected, and it really showed us why componentization was so important to us. We wanted to work in the milestones that we mentioned earlier, which kind of left some raw edges, and one of those was having a delivery without an order. So we wanted to make sure that we could combine what we were doing, and we wanted to make sure that transactional emails would still work, we would still have shipping methods that were correct. So we've learnt from the gifting integration that the additional work to de-risk delivery is worth doing, and we wanted to make sure that that we could de-risk delivery and we could safely ship this first milestone. It also furthers the tech strategy by allowing us to think of fulfillment as a service. So it's a step towards our tech strategy, additionally. So the story so far. It does turn out that change is the only constant. Our e-commerce platform is working its magic. We've seen conversion increase significantly. We launched Bloomon's first app, which is increasing retention. Scope was tight, and we followed up with some fast follows, both features and tech debt. We're still working on interweaving our tech strategy with everything we build alongside delivering business impact. Real-time stock keeping and our data-led forecasting model are out in the wild. We're still doing discovery as new problems arise, and we're taking it all in our stride.
So that's the end. Thank you. Thank you for listening. We feel much better now after sharing our story with you. And yeah, there's a few minutes, so if there are any questions, I think we're happy to take them.
Any questions? Oh. Okay, because I saw this one first, I would go and then you.
Thank you. You talked quite a bit about risk and how you dealt with that as part of your entire change process. How did you consider integrating your risk strategy and risk appetite within your process? I know it's a pretty hard question, but I find it quite fascinating.
So there were kind of two portions to the risk, I guess, like the technical delivery risk and then the business risk. Yeah, we were moving quickly. So there were some of the things that weren't like whole business cases to do with the risk. I think making sure that I think it was like weighing up the technical risk and the business risk. So I think that's where the EM/PM like trade-offs, because I had good grasp of the business risk, and then you came with the technical risk. So sorry, it's a bit yeah.
I suppose as well in terms of how we've been managing that week to week, we have like EM/PM cross meetings weekly where there's a risks tracker and everyone can raise them, and then we work through them and resolve them, and there's impact things, and it's all very detailed. But yeah, happy to share more later if interested.
Oh yeah, that was really good, by the way. Thank you. You talked about squads. I'm a relative newcomer to software development. what is a squad and what makes up a squad? And also, I really liked your Spice Girls gifs, the two become one. They're really good.
I was hoping people would get that.
All right.
It was a risky reference. It's like, you don't know who's in the room. So squads in the Bloom Wild context is a group of people that work together very closely. So it's your immediate team day to day. So in Bloom Wild, that's typically made up of between kind of 3 and 7 engineers, then kind of headed up by an engineering manager and a product manager, with a tech lead in there, and then for the client-focused squads, there'll be some design input too. So they'll be focused around those elements of the customer journey that we looked at earlier. So, thinking about how we surface products and how clients find us, or the checkout flow, or range and supply, so much more on the kind of back-end focused areas or operational areas.
Any other questions? No. So, thank you.
There's a late one.
There's one.
Hi, thanks. I really enjoyed your story. It's quite some stuff I'd love to discuss in more detail. But one of the things that really strikes me is that you worked together and collaborated really well to get through this. Have you got any kind of hints and tips on how you built that engineering manager, product manager relationship, and how you overcame any kind of points where it wasn't so straightforward?
I'm glad we managed to pretend. No, we do genuinely get on. I think communication was key, and spending time. There's a lot of functional meetings between an engineering manager and a product manager about who's doing what and what we're doing now, and if we refine the cards, and just taking time to chat and know each other. So we could get to a point where we were aligned. So whatever meeting we were going to, whatever part of the project we were talking of, I knew Ella's opinion on what we should be doing from a technical point of view. Ella knew the business context. So we weren't in meetings and there wasn't tension between the two of us. And I think that was really important in terms of like our collaboration. We have worked to kind of like roles of responsibilities across the EM/PM pairs. But I think what was successful was we knew our strengths and weaknesses and we could kind of cover for each other rather than feeling like this is your job list, this is my job list. It wasn't like this is your role, this is your role. It was very much like a collaboration of like, if you've not put the tags on a pivotal ticket, I'll do them. Like it was like a granular level. It was very like, oh, I've got this bit and you've got this bit and I'll run this meeting and I'm not feeling great today, you do this bit. So like feeling like you've got each other's back. I think as a product manager, I think as an EM, like it can feel a little bit lonely in the squad because you're the only one doing your role in your team. But feeling like you've got each other's back was definitely the key to the success, particularly through a time that was. So there was so much change, feeling like the engineers had that level of stability when looking at like the leadership within the squad. I think that was really important for us.
Yeah, great answer. Any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Ella. That was great.